From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro held a news conference on Saturday with regional representatives of the United Nations. The main topic discussed was the efforts of the Bolivarian government to achieve the goals of the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. On top of that, Maduro spoke about the need to re-establish talks with the opposition in order to achieve said goals.
Que nuestro país sepa.
Let all people know that Venezuela has fully accepted the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This means that the goals set by the UN as a global initiative will be part of our government agenda. I'd like to talk about these goals with the opposition, to have a long talk about social, political, economic issues, the topics that concern the opposition, as well as of the concerns of citizens. I want our conflicts to end. There are useless diatribes that lead nowhere, that are trying to escalate the conflict in Venezuela. We must put an end to them and promote dialogue. We must promote respect. And I hope that the United Nations can help us re-establish talks, even in private at first. I hope they help us establish a national dialogue for peace.
Earlier on Saturday, the Venezuelan foreign minister highlighted the diplomatic victory of the country after a number of nations from the so-called Lima Group backtracked their support from a recent declaration that sought to intervene in the country's territorial dispute with Guyana.
Hoy queremos dirigirnos al país.
We want to address the nation with a positive outlook. Our democracy has triumphed today. As you know, President Nicolas Maduro asked us to present a formal complaint to the countries that signed a declaration on January 4th, which included a paragraph that questioned the territorial integrity of our Bolivarian nation.
A los países de nuestra América, a los gobiernos, se entregaron esas notas de protesta y
those complaints were presented, and we gave them a 48-hour deadline to remove their support for that paragraph, which violated international law. We can now say that out of the 12 nations that signed their support for this declaration, 10 have withdrawn their support for the paragraph in question.
Que se atrevieron a firmar.
The foreign minister also called for dialogue and a return to cooperation between all nations, recalling the Geneva Agreement.
Tenemos que volver al diálogo.
We must return to dialogue, to cooperation. We must adhere to the Geneva Agreement from 1966, which is the legal apparatus that provides the rules for this historical dispute. We must add, the dispute with Guyana comes as a part of our colonial heritage, and we cannot allow for a colonial decree from the United Kingdom to rule over our territory and risk the security of our region.
And just days after the swearing-in ceremony for President Nicolas Maduro for a second term in office, national and international media are trying to discredit his achievement as well as his legitimacy. More in this report.
There is peace in Caracas, just days after Nicolas Maduro was sworn in for a second term as president, with the support of the Venezuelan people.
Juro a nombre del pueblo de Venezuela. Juro.
This is Henry. Just like every day, he came to buy the newspaper to see how the media portrays the latest political event. But as always, the newspaper headline has misleading information.
They manipulate the people. Take a look at what it says here. It's a shame. The reality is that Maduro was sworn in as president to work for the people.
He condemned a media campaign to discredit and undermine the electoral process and the democratic decision of the Venezuelan people.
They said they don't recognize Nicolas Maduro as president. 94 representatives from different countries came to the swearing-in ceremony. He was elected by the people. They have to respect my vote. I voted for Nicolas Maduro.
Henry is aware of the country's political and economic situation. He says Nicolas Maduro's second presidential term should be respected.
We are aware of what's going on. We will continue defending the revolutionary process. The opposition and the media will keep attacking us because they want all the power, but they will not defeat us.
Venezuelans will continue to defend themselves from media attacks that try to discredit their struggles and revolutionary achievements. They say they will continue to support President Maduro until the end of his second term in 2025.
The murders of social leaders in Colombia continue with no end in sight. Our correspondent in Bogota, Paola Fernandez, brings us the details of the latest case.
No cesa el asesinato de líderes sociales.
The murders of social leaders in Colombia continue. On Friday night, the body of a social leader was found in the department of Nariño. Those responsible for the crime haven't been found yet. There were also protests outside the Attorney General's office where several organizations demanded the resignation of the General Prosecutor and asked for effective measures to prevent the systematic murder of campesino and community leaders in rural Colombia. Social activists point to high impunity rates as one of the driving forces behind the murder of human rights advocates and social leaders. In a public statement, President Iván Duque said more citizen participation was necessary for state security forces to act. However, campesinos and social leaders have warned that their members do not get state protection even after denouncing threats against them. Prosecutor General said that 53% of the cases have been investigated and there are 30 arrest warrants.
Days before this latest murder, Colombia's Attorney General delivered a detailed report on state-backed murders of social leaders to the Special Jurisdiction of Peace. Now let's listen to the story of how victims are a step closer to find justice over 40 years.
Colombia's Attorney General Néstor Humberto Martínez delivered a report to the Special Jurisdiction of Peace that details the ongoing murders of social leaders, trade unionists, and human rights activists by state agents.
This is a very significant report, and it has particular importance at a time when we are investigating how social leaders became victims of the state during the armed conflict, crimes that everyone must know about.
According to the report, these state crimes were committed between 1985 and 2016. Most of them took place in the departments of Antioquia, Arauca, Northern Santander, Atlántico, and Cesar. The Attorney General highlighted that the aim of the report is to overcome impunity.
This report states that from 1985 to 2016, the prosecutor's office carried out 184 investigations, out of which 139 were done under Law 600 and 45 by Law 906. We must try to overcome impunity as a society, but nearly 75% of these cases are still under investigation. This implies that we need to double our efforts and make sure that the JEP will stop serious crimes from happening and put an end to impunity.
Those who condemn the killing of social leaders point out that it's important to dismantle internal policies that allow genocides to happen. For example, the one faced by the Patriotic Union in the 80s.
What we ask is that you acknowledge the systematic killing of social leaders, that nothing has changed after the peace deal, that the work of social leaders is being obstructed. We need to find those missing and we need to stop the murders happening today. Otherwise, Colombia will never move forward.
The president of the Special Jurisdiction of Peace, Patricia Linares, spoke about the importance of this report for both the country and for the victims. At the same time, she asked the government to put an end to the murder of social leaders, with over 500 lives lost so far.
We have a chance to reflect on this regretful situation across the country. It is very serious. But this report should inspire institutions to work together to end killings which affect the country greatly in the post-conflict era.
The Colombian government has long denied the existence of paramilitarism and its links to state agents. But the Attorney General's report states the perpetrators in most of these killings were the army, the police, the no longer operating Administrative Department of Security, and paramilitary groups.
At least 18 people have been killed and 12 others were injured in a fire at a clinic in Guayaquil, Ecuador. The patients of the clinic, which treated alcohol and drug addiction, died of lack of oxygen, while others suffer from smoke inhalation. The fire started with patients who were locked up in a room, set mattresses on fire to try to escape from the clinic. According to police, the people responsible for the fire have already been arrested.
We are deeply saddened by what happened. It seemed this was an illegal clinic, and we are investigating through the proper authorities.
Months after thousands of Central American migrants decided to flee their countries blaming insecurity and violence, many are wondering whether to wait for their asylum requests in the United States to be processed or find future elsewhere. Following weeks of pilgrimage and numerous attacks by U.S. President Donald Trump, many migrants remain stuck in the Mexican border town of Tijuana. Here, Pastor Alberto Rivera runs a shelter that is providing aid to those who are uncertain about their future. On top of food, housing, and free internet, the shelter helps migrants who want to stay in Mexico to obtain their work permits.
We treat all migrants the same. We have a medium-term program with which we try to help those who will be here for 6-7 months as they wait for their asylum request to be processed. We can help them get the work permits so they can work in Mexico. And we also have a long-term program because we have several migrants that have decided to stay here and establish themselves. So there are 3 levels with 3 different programs that we have to help them.
It's been very difficult to be here at the border. Sometimes it gets really cold. Sometimes you go hungry. You don't have a place to sleep. But thank God the pastor gave us lodging in this shelter. And he said we can stay as long as we want if we are good. And we can look for work here that we can use to help our families in Honduras.
The fight against fuel theft undertaken by the government of Mexico is starting to give results, according to the president. However, the plan has also generated fuel shortages in some states of the country.
These days, filling up the gas tank has become an odyssey for millions of drivers in central Mexico. Certain parts of the population have been affected the most. Oscar Fuentes is a taxi driver. The lack of fuel has greatly impacted his work.
We cannot work. We are on the move all day with only 10 or 20 liters, which is what they allow us to sell. It's not enough for our working day.
Despite these problems, citizens support the strategy against fuel theft undertaken by the government.
In the medium and long term, it's something that will benefit us all, because fuel will be replenished in Mexico City and throughout the country. Prices as well as theft and corruption will be kept in check. It's even possible that the price of gasoline could go down.
According to official figures, during 2018, the theft of fuel, or huachicoleo as it is known in Mexico, caused losses of up to $3 billion to a state oil company, Pemex.
This is an open secret because refinery staff and federal staff are colluding with the thieves.
Opposition groups have criticized the plan of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who defended the results of measures adopted on December 28th.
They used to steal fuel from about 800 pipelines daily. With this plan, we have lowered that figure to 100 pipelines. That is 700 less, so we estimate we have saved $156 million.
The president reported that 1,600 kilometers of pipelines are already under the watch of federal forces to avoid theft and sabotage.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Residents of the state of Ceará in Brazil are still living at the mercy of gangs that have unleashed a wave of violence throughout the state. The violence has been ongoing for 10 days now, despite the deployment of hundreds of security forces and the arrest of other 300 people. Citizens have been greatly affected as they face bombings, the burning of vehicles, and attacks against federal buildings. The crisis started after the government of Ceará announced measures to control the state's defective prison system.
We do not know who to trust. We have no guarantee of safety, so it's really difficult to go out on the street.
There are buses that we cannot take. We never know if we can go home. Some buses are much further away. It's total insecurity. It's gotten so complicated, we're at the mercy of the bandits.
A severe storm and heavy rains in northern Argentina have led to flooding of vast agricultural land and towns. According to local reports, over 3,000 hectares have been flooded in the provinces of Santa Fe, Chaco, and Santiago del Estero. Water in the area has risen past 1.5 meters in height. Hundreds of residents have been evacuated from the region. Over the last few months, the region has been above average rains, leading to heavy losses in cotton, rice, and other crops.
I had to come from my home because I can no longer be there. It rained so much, and I had to come to my mother's home. We are in a terrible state. You can't live like this. And the kids, look at how they're sleeping. I had to bring them here because of the disaster. I lost all my things. It's chaotic to live like this.
This week saw the 61st anniversary of the death of Chilean poet Gabriela Mistral. At a time when women's voices were often silenced, she was largely ignored in Chile until she became the first Latin American writer to win a Nobel Prize in Literature.
This is an important date, but its commemoration is still unnoticed. Chile had to wait until the world recognized the work of its poet Gabriela Mistral before she could receive the most prestigious literary award in Chile.
Chile
ignored her and criticized her. Then she won the Nobel Prize, and after that they couldn't ignore her anymore.
Meciendo mi carne, meciendo a mi hijo, voy moliendo el mundo con mis pulsos vivos.
Gabriela Mistral faced a conservative, male-dominated world and dared to break the barriers that keep women, indigenous people, and the poor ignorant.
Educating a woman means giving her dignity, opening up more opportunities for her future, lifting her out of degradation. It is important that women stop needing protection and can live without sacrificing their happiness.
Y pueda vivir sin que tenga que sacrificar su felicidad.
Her real name was Lucila Godoy Alcayaga. She was born in a small town in the north of the country. When she was little, she worked at the local rural school, and at 13, she wrote her first poem. 2 years later, she began to study to become a teacher. She also contributed to local papers and became a feminist.
She was a citizen of the world. She was deeply interested in the continent's political life and its economy. She had opinions about everything. By the middle of the 20th century, she was one of the most important intellectuals in Latin America.
She went to Mexico in the middle of its revolution and took part in its educational reform. She was opposed to dictatorship and any type of oppression. She came to know love alongside her partner Doris Dana. Do you think that the story of Gabriela Mistral has been silenced?
Yes, especially in relation to her sexual orientation. The official version is that she wasn't a lesbian, but everyone knows she was. That is very present in her work, but that aspect of her was silenced.
She was never recognized like Pablo Neruda, but her work touched people. Thousands of them lined up to say their last goodbyes.
She was so present in Chileans' lives because she touched on the real problems the country had, and those problems still remain today, more than 60 years after her death. To understand Chile, we have to understand Gabriela Mistral.
Because Gabriela Mistral, the poet, came out of the people. She was one of them.
Thousands of people in Senegal have demonstrated against a new electoral law. The new law requires presidential candidates to be endorsed by at least 1% of the electorate nationwide to be eligible to stand for election. Opposition members have accused the government of suspiciously applying the law in order to disqualify opposition candidates.
Especially the endorsements by voters. We don't even understand it. Nobody knows what is happening. So we say no. We can't let that slide.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has vowed to create more jobs, boost economic growth, and address racial inequalities. He did so while launching his Paris election manifesto ahead of general elections expected in May. Analysts say Ramaphosa's ruling party, which has ruled South Africa since the end of the apartheid 25 years ago, is expected to win the ballot despite internal divisions and a slow economy. The runner-up for the presidential elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo has filed a complaint in the country's constitutional court asking for a recount of the votes. Martin Fayayulu claims he won the elections and has asked for a manual recount. To confirm this, the court now has 8 days to rule on the complaint. On Friday, the DRC's Electoral Commission declared Felix Tshisekedi as the new country's president.
No way.
More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Yellow Vest protests in France have entered their 9th week with reports of over 30,000 protesters participating across the country. Clashes have continued into the night with dozens arrested and a few left seriously injured. Police used water cannons and tear gas to repel the demonstrators in different cities of the country. More than 80,000 police are on duty for the protests nationwide. The latest action comes days before the government is set to launch a 3-month national debate. The debate will focus on 4 themes: taxes, green energy, institutional reform, and citizenship. And thousands of pro- and anti-Brexit protesters have marched in the UK, also wearing yellow vests. Protesters rallied outside Downing Street, the residence of the British Prime Minister, and called for early elections. The pro-Brexit marchers were seen burning European Union flags and chanting anti-EU slogans. Police needed to intervene after fighting broke between both sides. Our correspondent in London, Pablo Navarrete, has more on this.
Thousands have come out in the streets of London today to call on British Prime Minister Theresa May to call a general election ahead of the crucial vote on Tuesday on the Brexit deal that the British government has arranged with the European Union. The event has been organised by the People's Assembly Against Austerity, which is also using the protest to call out the British government for the dramatic rises in homelessness and poverty and a range of other measures that have arisen from the austerity policies that have been in place since at least May 2010, when the Tory Conservative government came to power. Now, the organisation organising it, the People's Assembly, is a group that has members of the Labour Party, the Green Party, and a number of British trade union movements, and groups from all of these different civil society, trade union and political groups have come out to the streets of London today. People have travelled from across England, from Newcastle, from various other cities, and there are other smaller events taking place across the country.
It's time to bring you some other stories from around the world.
At least 2 firefighters and a Spanish woman have been killed after a powerful gas explosion at a bakery in central Paris in France. Nearly 50 people have also been injured. 10 are reported to be in serious condition. The explosion happened near the Paris Opera, badly damaged nearby apartments. Around 200 firefighters were mobilized at the scene.
At this stage, we can say that the blast was obviously caused accidentally by a gas leak. We must be careful, since the investigations are supposed to determine the precise origin of this dramatic fire and explosion. There was first a gas leak, then the arrival of firefighters, which was followed by an explosion that caused the fire.
The teenage Saudi woman who fled from her family has landed in Canada after being granted asylum. Upon arrival, the Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister welcomed her, saying she is a very brave new Canadian. Rahaf Mohammad Al-Kunoon said she feared for her life and refused to fly home. Earlier this week, she barricaded herself at an airport in Thailand for days. Macedonia's parliament has approved to change the country's name to North Macedonia, ending a long-standing dispute with Greece. This dispute has been the stumbling block to the country's application to join the European Union. Greece had complained that the name is a cultural and territorial claims to a Greek province of the same name.
And with this, we come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories you can find on our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.